What's going on, YouTube? This is SG1 Sports, and you're watching our college football channel. We continue with our 2023 schedule preview and projected record series. Michigan State is up next. Michigan State coming off of a very disappointing year last year, going just 5-7, and it surprised me. I actually thought Michigan State was going to be a top 25 team last year with everything they did have coming back, some transfers. I thought it was going to work out a little bit better for them. And it, again, was not a good season. You know, we didn't realize at the time how good Washington was. Washington was a really good team last year, so looking back, not really a surprise Michigan State lost that game. And, you know, they lost games they should have won. Indiana, you know, you feel like Michigan State was a better team than Indiana. And then, you know, didn't win some of these 50-50 games. Minnesota, Maryland. But at the same time, they did win some games that you could have seen them losing as well. Michigan, Illinois. They had a lot of, games on this schedule where they didn't have, outside of Western Michigan and Akron, pretty much every game was a game that they had a chance to lose, and most of them were games where they had a chance to win, and they just didn't win many of them. Washington, Ohio State, Michigan, Penn State, obviously those were going to be tough games, but all in all, again, a disappointing season for them last year. And a tough non-conference schedule because of Washington. Again, that's not something that most people saw coming in the preseason last year. So we look at this year's schedule. They'll play Washington again, this time at home. But they'll open up on September 2nd against Central Michigan. Then it's Richmond on September the 9th. Then there's that game against Washington, September 16th. Home game this time. They'll play their 3 non-conference games first before going into conference play. And they start that on September 23rd with a home game against Maryland. Then on the 30th, they'll go on the road to face Iowa. They do get a bye week after Iowa. Then they'll go on the road to face Rutgers. Back-to-back road games there, but again, a bye week in between those two games. They play Michigan on the 21st at home. Minnesota on the 28th on the road. They get Nebraska at home on November the 4th. Then they go on the road to face Ohio State, then on the road at Indiana. So again, back-to-back road games. They will close things out with Penn State there on November 25th. So you look at this schedule. Again, Washington in the non-conference is going to be very, very tough. A couple of easy games outside of that one. You look at who they play out of the West. They're going to get Iowa on the road, Minnesota on the road, and also Nebraska, who could be pretty good this year. So that's a pretty tough draw. They don't get to play Northwestern. That's one you'd probably want to play. You avoid Wisconsin. I think they have a chance to be pretty good this year. But it really doesn't matter who you play out of the West because that division is so even. But again, you look at the way the games are set up. Back-to-back road games with Iowa and Rutgers. Back-to-back with Ohio State and Indiana. The good news is probably their 2 easiest conference games are Rutgers and Indiana. And those are the games on the end of a back-to-back. So those are games that they should probably win. That's the good news. You know, it makes it where you have a better chance to win one of your 2 back-to-back games. But at the same time, it means, you know, maybe Rutgers is a game that Michigan State would easily win. But because it's right after a road game against Iowa, or the Indiana game right after a road game against Ohio State, maybe they slip up and lose. So it depends on how you look at it. But every game's going to be tough. Once they get to Washington the rest of the way, there will be no easy wins in some games where they probably don't have much of a chance unless they improve a lot from last year. And we're kind of basing this off of how the teams finished last year with a little bit of an adjustment for what we expect and what most people expect going into 2023. I expect Michigan State to be not on Ohio State, Michigan, or Penn State's level, maybe a step behind Maryland. But I think they'll be a better team than Indiana and Rutgers. So that's kind of how we're going into this. So this is the scale that we'll use. If it's a 50-50 game, it'll stay in the white. Those are games where I think the spread will be less than a touchdown. Under 20, over 80, those are games where I think the spread will be 20 or more. 20-29, 71-80, those are games where I think the spread will be double digits, 10-19 points. 30-39, 61-70, games where I think they're not toss-ups, but there's not going to be a huge spread, only about a touchdown spread, 6, 7, 8 points. And again, those are not easy wins or guaranteed losses, but there will be a clear favorite in those games. And we'll start with the easy wins. Central Michigan, Richmond, those games should both be easy wins for Michigan State. Would really be surprised if they were to lose either one of these. Then we go to Rutgers and Indiana. So I feel like Michigan State is going to be the better team next year. I haven't, it's early. We're still in February. I haven't done a ton of research on these teams and looking at the rosters just yet, but I do believe that the roster for Michigan State will be a good bit better than Rutgers and Indiana. I know they lost to Indiana last year, but still, if you look at the entirety of everything, Michigan State should be the better team. But those games are on the road. They are on the back end of a back-to-back road games. And so that's why I think Michigan State will only be favored by maybe 6 or 7 points. That's why I put these in the purple. Those will not be easy wins, I'm telling you. It's never easy to win on the road in the Big Ten. And then we go to the flip side, the games where I think they'll be underdogs. And I think they're going to be double-digit underdogs against Washington, Michigan, Ohio State, and Penn State. They do get 3 of these 4 games at home, so that gives you a little bit of hope that maybe they can pull off a big upset. Maybe they can knock off Washington, but I tell you, that Washington team is absolutely loaded. They have a lot coming back. Michigan, experience-wise, talent-wise, they are potentially the best team in the country next year. I mean, this is a really, really good Michigan team. It is at home. That gives you a little bit of a chance maybe for Michigan State. It's a rivalry, but I do think Michigan will be favored by 14 plus in this one. Ohio State on the road, that's going to be tough. And then Penn State, and that one will be tough as well. This team looks like they're going to be really, really good next year. So those are the games where Michigan State is going to be a big underdog. Games where I think they'll be about a touchdown underdog. Minnesota and Iowa, because these games are on the road, those teams I think should be a little bit better than Michigan State. And then you add in the fact that the games will be on the road. That's why I've got them in the yellow. I think these will be tough for Michigan State. Not games that they can't win, but games that'll be tough. And they'll be a clear underdog, I think, in both of these. And then that leaves Maryland and Nebraska. I believe Maryland and Nebraska probably better teams than Michigan State, although Nebraska is really, we don't know about Nebraska. I think Maryland probably better than Michigan State. But the game is at home for Michigan State. I think that gives them a chance. Nebraska, again, a lot of unknowns there. I think that's a 50-50 game as well. These games are really those toss-up games where I think the spread will be less than a touchdown. So you got a couple of those. So kind of a lot of different colors here on the schedule for Michigan State. To get the projection, we count the green games as wins. We count the orange games as losses. 35% for the yellow, 65% for the purple, 50% for the white. So it's kind of this is a really easy projection to do. You would count the 2 green games as wins, the 4 orange games as losses. That puts them at 2 and 4. And then you've got 6 more games, and you got 2 of everything: 2 yellow, 2 purple, 2 white, which means 3 and 3 in those games. However it comes out, they would go 3 and 3 in those games. So that's 3 wins for them. Add in the 2 green games, and you get a projection of 5 and 7, same record as last year. I think this Michigan State team has a chance to maybe do better than this, but at the same time, if they can't beat Washington, Michigan, Ohio State, and Penn State, you're already at 4 losses there. You can't afford to lose. If you're going to get to a bowl game, you can only lose a couple more games. If they lose to Iowa and Minnesota, you've got to beat Maryland. You've got to beat Nebraska. You've got to take care of business against Rutgers and Indiana. You can see how they could possibly go 5 and 7 again. Maybe they're one of the better 5 and 7 teams next year. But if they can find a way to pull off a win against Iowa or Minnesota, or if they do beat Maryland, Nebraska, Rutgers, Indiana, you could see them getting to a bowl game. But it's hard to imagine them doing much better than 6 and 6 or 7 and 5. So I think 5 and 7 definitely is possible, and that's what the projection says for Michigan State in 2023.